Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm. I'll be your host, and today I'm joined with a very flashy Doug Hagren. Hey, Doug.
Hey, sun's out. I don't have any guns. Guns out, fun's out. Let's play. Happy Friday. And of course, go Bucks. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's an important part of the shirt. For those of you audio viewers, Doug's got a very flashy shirt on today. Not the conservative financial industry kind of attire that most people wear, but Doug's unique today.
Well, many people say I'm unique many times, Kirk. So.
You're not just unique, Doug. You're very unique.
I'm very unique. Not many people have said this before you, and you won't be the last.
Nope. Certainly won't. Well, let's dive right in. So 4th of July came and went, and hopefully everybody had a good time. I was up in Michigan, went to see family. It was great. We're up in Lake Michigan, and I'll tell you, my ice bath came in handy because that water was real cold, but it was awesome. It was very refreshing, just beautiful out. Weather couldn't have been better. And then we went down towards Buchanan in Michigan at the end of the trip to see other family. So it was just an all-around great trip, and glad we did it. Need a little R&R, which I guess is best you can do that. The kids got a little jet skiing in and tubing and all the fun stuff that they wanted to do. So I think it's good. We're back. It's a little now my vacation begins. So.
For anybody that knows the area, Kirk, I have a question. Did you brave the whatever it is, the $20,000-$30,000 fine or whatever it is that they charge you on Sleeping Bear Dunes if you go down and can't make it back up?
I didn't go. So I've been to Sleeping Bear Dunes in the past. It's really cool, but it's like going to the desert. I want to go to the beach, not the desert. So we didn't do that this time. But no, I wasn't aware, but I could see why they'd fine you because it was hell getting up there. And so it's funny. It's like you go up Sleeping Bear Dunes and then you're like, oh, I'm going to go over that hill and the ocean will be right there. And then you like, oh, that's not the end of the hill. And then you go up again and like, oh, that's not the end of the hill. It just like keeps going. You keep thinking it's the end, but it's not. I did that like 10 years ago, 11 years ago was the last time I went. And I went so far, I'm like, F this. I'm going back. Like, I'm done. I was hoping to get a refreshing splash at the end, but it just kept going. So I don't know how far it is. It's got to be like a mile, but it's just like the desert. You're just in sand. So the fun part's the front, but after that, I don't know.
I guess it's only a $3,000 rescue, but there's a port where it does come down to the ocean where it is literally like this.
Yeah.
And people will try to go down, and then to come up, you have to literally stab the sand to climb it.
Mm-hmm.
And every year they've got multiple people who cannot make it back up, and there's no beach at the bottom. It goes right down in the water.
Yeah.
So $3,000 fine for a rescue if they have to come and basically boat you out of it. So it's people, it's something people do to test themselves. I guess. I don't know. I think you should try it sometime, Kirk.
I've done it. I just haven't gone all the way because I wasn't in the mood for that kind of activity. But we went to the lighthouse, and there's a lighthouse museum further down, and there was dunes there. We went in, and that was tough. I don't know. I'm past my prime, Doug. I'm not sure I'm going to be doing any marathons up Sleeping Bear Dunes anymore. That day is coming past.
All right, old man. No, just kidding. I don't think I am either.
Yeah, but anyway, so let's talk about this week. So obviously, things have happened and they haven't happened. Honestly, we did it. The last time we did the live episode was like a week and a half ago, so it's been a little while. But yeah, so 4th of July came and went. People had fun, no craziness. I mean, of course, we had the Israel and Iran incident, but I think we talked about that last time. What's happened with that? That kind of like came and went. We still at war, or like we bombed some stuff, and then we're done.
Trump solved it. It's 11-day war. It's gone. It's gone and over.
This reminds me of that George Bush mission accomplished when he in Iraq and he landed on the aircraft carrier with the fighter plane. We're like mission accomplished. Like after like a day, like 10 years later, we're still there. Like okay. I feel like it was maybe one of those moments. I don't know. Whatever happened, we're on to the next thing. The big, beautiful bill passed. Maybe we should talk about that, Doug, because there's a lot in the big beautiful bill. So we'll talk about that a little bit.
There is.
Let's start with that because there's a ton of stuff in there. So there's a post on X, and I'm going to kind of run through some of the highlights because there's a ton of stuff, and I'm sure not all of it is going to come out or has come out quite yet, because there's going to be, I mean, just like every other big beautiful bill, there's a lot in it. Why is this? Sorry. Well, I'll get to that in a second because I'm trying to get my thing working here. There we go. Get X working. All right. So basically, the extension of the tax rates were permanent from 2017. I always find this comical. I'm just going to give my side notes for each one of these. I find it comical because permanent doesn't mean anything. Everything is subject to change for the next administration. It's not really permanent, but they use that word because the first time it was like, well, it's temporary, and then we have to come up again. Okay. like it's a negotiation every time. So I don't know why they even bother. But anyway, they make it sound good, just like the PR of the big beautiful bill. I don't think they should have called it big. I think that was stupid. But anyway, it's a lot of pork, and certainly a lot more debt. Depending who you talk to, somewhere around $4 trillion will be added to our outstanding debt, which is awesome. That's wonderful. I think we're all happy about that. And I'm being sarcastic for those of you who don't know me. The standard deduction, I think, went from let's see, 31,500 for the standard deduction, and that's it's permanent as well. Permanent as well. The deduction for seniors, child tax credit. There's a deduction on business income. Salt tax increased to 40,000 from where was it before? Oh, it'll revert back to 10,000 in 2030. And some of these things are just stupid. I don't know why they bother doing that. They just say it's there and then you just adjust it later. No tax on tips. That made a lot of people who make their living on tips happy. Although it's not 100%. There's some step downs if you make enough money. No tax on overtime. Also step downs. Car loan deduction, which is great. The $10,000 deduction on car loan interest, 2025 to 28. That's exciting. I just bought a new car. Those, I got to tell this quick story, and I'll let we'll cut through the rest. So about a month ago, I got rear-ended on the highway in my 2011 Honda Pilot, which is a perfectly good car. I had 200,000 miles on it, still in good shape. I mean, ran well. I probably could have got another 100,000 miles on it. I am of the old school. I don't like spending money on stuff. I'm an old Yankee, as they call it, Boston Yankee. I don't like spending money. So anyway, this car is perfectly good. Good shape. Minor issues, but nothing big deal. Anyway, so this idiot hits me from behind. Wasn't paying attention. On her phone. Clearly, because there's no way she rear-ended me on the highway. Anyway, so I called the insurance, and my car wasn't worth very much because it's 2011, 200,000 miles on it. I think my car was worth like $6,000. Or no, I'm sorry, it was like $4,000. And then anyway, so I go to get it fixed, and it was it wasn't a big deal. But it messed up the muffler, and it messed up the bumper, so I couldn't open the rear trunk. So I had to get it fixed. And they're like, well, you can get it fixed, but you're basically you won't have any comprehensive coverage because your car is totaled. And I was like, what? Like, well, I'll keep the bumper. It's not a big deal, but like the muffler costs like $3,000 or something stupid. Anyway, so the car was totaled, and they're like, you could take a check for like $5,000, or you could take like 3,500 and get the car fixed. I'm like, I'll just take the check, like whatever. So I got a new car, new 2022 Honda Pilot. Something I figured out was really interesting. So I was looking at the depreciation of cars, and the first 2 years, for the Pilot, it was 5,000 a year depreciation. After the first big jump of the first year, when you drive it off the lot, it's like 20%. But like after that, it was like 5,000 a year, and then year 3, it goes down to 3,000 a year, and it's pretty much 3,000 a year after that. So I bought a 2022, which will depreciate for about 3,000 a year, and in 3 years, 2 or 3 years, I might just change it over into a new one. So it costs me about $3,000 a year to own the car, and I can decide in a few years if I want a new one because I needed it quick. Anyway, it was kind of a good thought experiment about how to buy a car. The other reason I don't like buying new cars is because I don't have a payment and just keep it, and you don't have to pay for a car other than insurance. Anyway, so new interest, which I'm not excited about, but anyway, so we had that, which was interesting, and used cars actually were not all that cheap, surprisingly. I guess they still have that problem out there with used cars. But yeah, my wife got a new car because she didn't want to deal with it. But yeah, she got a new Pilot. I got a 3-year-old Pilot. It's great. I love my car. It's nice now. I feel like I'm in a boat. I feel like I'm in a luxury boat. It's really weird driving it. Anyway, same size as my other one. So anyway, so thankfully that car loan deduction is going to be there up to 10,000, which is great. Also reduced if people make over a certain amount of money, $200 for every thousand gross income exceeds over 100,000, or 200 if you're married. So probably whatever, maybe not apply. The Trump account, which I think is funny, but anyway, Trump account, you can put. It's kind of like an individual. It's kind of like an IRA, but not a Roth for somebody who's under 18. You can put 5,000 a year, no deductions allowed. This is weird. I still need to look into this because I was on vacation last week. But no deduction allowed. I don't understand. You can't withdraw before 18, so I need to look into that a little bit more on the specifics because it'll take a while for the financial institutions to actually set that up. It'll probably take them like 3 to 4 months to get those accounts set up at least. You also have dependent care, 529 expansion. Let's see. I'll let Doug talk about some of those. Then we also have the let's see, charitable deductions. We have the 1099Ks, termination EV subsidies. I think that got Elon Musk a little upset. And then bonus depreciation, increased state tax exemption. That'll be a good one. Increased from basically 14 to 15, and I think inflation just after that. I think that one was needed. I think that's just one of those essential things that you might think, well, who needs $15 million? Well, the reality is, if you ever watch the show Yellowstone's a perfect example of why you need it. There's a lot of people in this country, and the people on the coast probably don't care because they don't care about people in the middle. But the people in the middle, there's a lot of people with land, and that land is valuable, but they're cash flow poor. So farmers, the people who feed us on the coast, right? The people who have all the food that we eat, they have a lot of land and they're asset rich, but they're cash flow poor. Farmers are not wealthy, but they have a lot of assets. So a farmer might have, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 acres. It might be worth, 10 million, let's say, somewhere in Montana, it might be worth 20 million. Well, 20 million, your heirs can't take over that farm. So who's going to take over the farm? Well, Bill Gates, who's in there buying farms. So, BlackRock's going to be buying it. No, we should keep it with individuals and not with, big hedge funds that I don't trust them with our food. Anyway, the point being is this is mainly to appease that group, because that group doesn't have the cash flow to pay the taxes on it. And that's the biggest problem. So, maybe they should have just had a farmer exemption, and that would, alleviate everyone else. But the reality is that 15 million this day and age isn't egregious. The wealthy people, certainly, they just donate it all to charity, and then they have their kids run the charity. So they have different ways of screwing over the system.
I live in the great state of Massachusetts. I may be the only one who calls it that, but I digress. The great state of Massachusetts has a commercial funded by the state that says, you can't win the lottery if you don't play. For the moment, let's ignore the fact that there's a state-sponsored commercial suggesting that you go out and spend your hard-earned money gambling on lottery tickets with odds of over 100 million to 1 of winning. But it's true, you can't win if you don't play. I'm giving you the same opportunity here in the show. The only difference is I'm not asking you to buy a lottery ticket. I'm only asking 5 to 10 minutes of your time. But I will pay you at least 100 million Zim dollars for your time. We do have some foreign listeners. So if you don't like Zim dollars, we may have some other currencies as well. If you want to earn over 100 million Zim dollars, go to www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money to get your free money today.
But anyway, which ones of these do you want to talk about, Doug? I glazed over them because I want to give you a chance to talk about some of them.
Well, you know one I want to talk about.
Yes, I do.
Yes, we do. I'm going to talk about the education part, and we here because there's a lot of things that change, and I don't know. You might know that I talk about the importance of college planning now and then, Kirk. If you listen, well, guess what? Things just got big and beautiful for the college planning industry because they just went through with a saber and absolutely slashed and diced it. So a couple of things. Let's start with K through 12 education provisions. There is now a federal tax credit scholarship. It's called it is going to allow individuals and corporations to donate up to $1,700 annually to a scholarship granting organizations. You'll receive a 100% federal tax credit. Those nonprofits are supposed to be positioned to distribute scholarships to low and middle income families up to 300% of the area's median gross income for private and charter school tuition. So a lot of people wanted to be able to have more control of their tax dollars going to private where they want to go to school choice. This definitely aligns with that. The program is actually modeled after the existing Florida Tax Credit Scholarship Program, which is supporting about 120,000 students. There is no cap on the total tax credits payout in the bill. There had been a proposed $5 to $6 billion cap, but that was removed. You talked about 529 education credits. The bill expands the use of 529 accounts. It was previously limited to only $10,000 annually for K through 12 tuition to cover additional expenses like tutoring, textbooks, test preparation, online learning, homeschool materials, and special education services such as speech and occupational therapy. They've created American Values Curriculum Grants. That's about $500 million for grants to promote curricula emphasizing American exceptionalism and national pride. So, hey, America, there we go. We got $500 million in grants to make sure that we remember that, our American, what's the word I'm looking for? Not loyalty, but America, it's definitely something that, aligns very much with their, their philosophies is America first. Now let's talk about higher education. This is the one I think that has the biggest impact for a lot of people that I talk to. In July of 2026, so it will not happen this year. So if you have a child going into school in August, not applicable, but they're going to be there probably the next 3+ years, so they will be affected. The bill imposes new limits. There is now only $100,000 allowable for borrowing from the federal for master's degrees. $200,000 is allowed for doctoral and professional degrees, such as medical or law school. But they have capped a $257,500 lifetime for all federal student loans and $65,000 lifetime for Parent Plus loans. Grad Plus loans, which had been allowed to graduate students to borrow up to the full cost of attendance, have been eliminated. So they are gone. So now, one of the concerns and questions is, medical school can cost $250,000 to $300,000. So this is going to mean that there is going to be an availability of federal loans less than some degrees. They also changed repayment options. So again, post 26, new borrowers are limited to 2 repayment plans. One's a standard fixed payment plan or what's called a repayment assistance plan, a RAP. Other programs are out there that were attributed to the Biden administration, like SAVE or income contingent repayment or pay as you earn, are all discontinued. RAP could actually increase monthly payments for some of those compared to the SAVE program. Another one that was thought to have been eliminated, but it looks like it's intact for now, but they are working on limiting eligibility heavily, is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. So if someone got a degree and then went into a public service type position, working for the government to some capacity, whether it's community health programs or education, after 10 years of work there, 10 years from their last loan distribution would have been forgiven. It's still in place, but it does look like there is going to be a lot. They're going to continue to try to wear down on that. And so, there's pros and cons to talk about. There's a couple more things. Workforce Pell Grants. Students from low income backgrounds can use them for short-term 8 to 15-week workforce training programs. So that could be very helpful in helping to get more technical degrees. High skill, high wage, in-demand jobs as defined by the Federal Perkins Career and Technical Education Act would be eligible in that area. There's endowment taxes now. I mean, there's so much. The bill is increasing tax on university endowments, particularly for wealthier institutions. So the Ivy Leagues just got hammered, 1.4% up to 8% based on endowment size per student. That's excluding international students in the calculation. There's Medicaid cuts. So there's going to be about $1 trillion for Medicaid, which again, indirectly, because a lot of schools received mental health support accommodations for students, and so there's going to be some impact there. I'll just kind of end it on this and then pass it back to you. If you got some thoughts, but there's also, they've been talking about the Department of Education. They've, of course, it's opinions of who's, those in power, but there have been people who've claiming that they believe the Department of Education is highly bloated. They're going to slash discretionary spending by nearly 20% over 5 years, potentially reducing programs like TRIO, which does support college access for low-income students. And the one last thing that I wanted to add on this that I almost forgot, I'm looking through my notes here. There is going to be deferment. There was going to be, deferment. There's ways in which you could postpone paying on student loans, but deferment now is been limited to, so there's several reasons in which, and for hardship, for example, that you could defer paying, those have gone away. So if I'm going to summarize this, there's going to be less money for the Department of Education, less money available from the federal government for those that are trying to go to school. It may be less than what's needed for degrees. That's going to force potentially more private lending, which of course is harder to get and has its own challenges, which I am not a fan of private lending because of those things. That's why the planning is so critical. There's going to be more money available for technical degrees, which again, we have a need for. But if this is something that you're looking at and college planning is on your radar, this is what college planning is going to become more critical than ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because there's a lot of things that are not a surprise to people. Like we've seen this for a while, we've known. I'm curious so the way I understand it is basically it shoves so much into this bill that they never really, they got their whole agenda done. And so they don't really have to do much after this, which I think, not from a partisan, just from a politicking standpoint, smart, because they got midterms coming up. But I have to say, there's a lot of people who are not really happy with Trump right now, primarily because of the whole Iran thing. I think a lot of people aren't happy, myself included. I think the whole thing to me seemed like a charade. I was listening to somebody talk about this week, and they were talking about kayfabe. You familiar with kayfabe, Doug? The wrestling term.
Oh yes.
First rule of kayfabe is you don't talk about the kayfabe. It's like, and I heard something about like Iran, and if it's true, it just made me laugh because sometimes I feel like the whole global conflict is a charade, and so we went and so Israel bombed a bunch of their stuff. We went and delivered a few bombs and had that mission accomplished moment like Bush did. And then Iran shot a bunch of missiles at our base, but called us in advance to tell us that they were going to do that, to let us know we were shooting missiles at your base. And I was like,
no charade there.
What is going on in this world? Like, are we in the book 1984? We're like, I mean, I think it was Matt Taibbi.
Where's your hat?
Yeah, like Matt Taibbi just did a podcast episode on reviewing 1984 again, and they were talking about how everyone's in the public square, and they're like, yeah, they're the criminals, like Pan Pacific are the criminals, and like right in the middle of the event where people like cheering like down with Pan Pacific, and they're like, it's like, no, well, actually, we're against Eurasia. Eurasia, and I forget it was a different name. It was like Eurasia, they're the enemy. Like, oh, you got these people putting up for Pan Pacifica. Like, I mean, it was just so hilariously funny, and it feels like we're in that kind of a movie where it's just so weird. It's just funny. You can't take any of this stuff seriously. I really believe that this stuff is not even worth spending time other than for humor. So, but anyway, I just kind of wanted to discuss that. I know Elon came out and said they're coming out with the America Party. I feel like he could have done a little bit more creative than that. I mean, the guy's like the most successful and wealthiest guy on the planet. You couldn't have hired somebody to come up with a better name than the America's Party. I mean, come on.
Well,
Party of the United States of America. Like,
or look back. We've been through this before with Ross Perot. All that
Yeah.
does is create fracture and a disaster.
Yeah, I whatever. I think it's just Elon Musk doing his PR stuff. He's really good at PR. And I will say this for everyone who's following the details and getting caught up in the details, don't. We talked about this last time with Elon Musk. Like, remember when he was taking over Twitter and the left melted down? They said, "Oh my God, he's going to ruin it. He's going to ruin our thing." And so he said, "Yeah, I don't want it. It's too expensive." And they're like, "No, you got to take it. You got to take it." And so he like sailed into that closing without any objection because people were basically telling him to take it, and that's what he wanted in the first place. It's just hilariously dumb on how dumb some people are. Anyway, the point being is you never really know. Like Elon Musk is a master at PR and managing the public perception. So anytime I see him doing something, I always take it with a grain of salt. I mean, him is spat with Trump. Who the hell knows? Who cares? Frankly, who really cares? Anyway, so I certainly wouldn't be owning any Tesla stock right now if he's spending all his time in politics and not run that company. I think that company's got its own issues with that, with taking away the tax credits, the EV tax credits. So, but anyway, let's get into some real world stuff. So,
he just lost the CEO of X too, and there's a lot of stuff behind the curtain, and a lot of people that, and granted, they're most, we got Tesla, it's public. A lot of his main investors, I think, for one of the companies or the institutional investment shops, basically just said that they're not, they're going to hold back and not even release their recommendations now because of him being back focused on it. You've got people that are behind the private side, because obviously a lot of his companies are private now, like X. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of confusion, a lot of disgruntled institutions and individuals that are in that circle. It's going to be, again, we talk about the drama. It's going to be fun to watch from the sideline.
Yeah, well, let's sit here with my popcorn. I don't really care about any of it. But here's the thing. So let's talk about this. This is consumer sentiment about people losing their jobs, right? So this is looking at where we are right now, University of Michigan. This is done by Apollo. Apollo had a great PDF, and I'm going to share some of these. But basically, it's people worried about losing their jobs has skyrocketed. This is pre-recession levels, people losing their jobs. Now, part of this obviously is due to Doge coming to Washington. So it wasn't just today, but that started it. And then we had an additional jump. I think a lot of people are really worried about the recession. And here's kind of my take about the recession. There are a bunch of times in recent history when Biden was in, there was the recession that he said wasn't a recession and then they try to explain out why, but technically it was. If you go back to the technical definition of how they define it, it was a recession, but they said no. And I understand their justification. So it's like, what's a recession? I don't even know. Usually it's obvious. Anyway, so obviously they didn't mark it down here in, I think it was 22, where they said it was a recession. This is markers of a recession. Like, this is an indication that there's a recession. Now, there are a lot of people struggling, and it's getting worse. And the haves and the have-nots, the split is getting worse. So if you really think about, like, are we in a recession? Does it really matter? Well, here's the big question. Does it impact your stock portfolio? If we're having a recession and stock market is climbing, do you really care if there's a recession? Now, I ask this question because a lot of us get caught up in the weeds. I like the macro. the global macro perspective of what's going on. It helps me discern direction, trends, and all that. So because of that, that really hinders my investing, because none of that really matters in the day-to-day stuff. It matters in the macro direction, like, all right, is AI going to be a trend or not? Is Bitcoin going to be a trend or not? You know, is nuclear going to be a trend or not? Those are important trends. That's where macro comes in handy to decide, is this going to be a big trend? Now, in the weeds, it doesn't matter because I have no idea, right? And you could be in a recession, the stock market could keep climbing. So why does it matter if you're in a recession? And that's really the underlying question you have to ask yourself, because a lot of us, and I'll say us, because there's the perma bulls, the people who think the market's always going up, even if the sky's falling. Oh, it's going up. Don't worry about the sky. It won't hit you. You know, just keep buying. And then there's the perma bears who think who think that the market is always going to zero, the dollar's going to zero, gold's going to the moon. You know the types. I won't mention the names, but people who think that even though the market's climbing and having a bull market, they think that the sky's falling. The problem is that the bulls are rarely intellectually correct. When I say intellectually, like if you look at the data, you're an idiot because you're going against all the data, but they're correct in the sense that they made money. So they are correct. But intellectually, it's not an interesting conversation, because it's like, yeah, you've got these 50 data points pointing to recession, but the stock market's still going up. So they're right, but intellectually they're not, because it doesn't line up. Now, the bears have a much more appealing intellectual decision. They're looking at saying, this is a recession, X, Y, and Z should happen, but it doesn't. And it rarely does. So what happens with the bears are intellectually correct, but they're wrong most of the time. And so it's a problematic standpoint to be a bull versus a bear. I mean, the bulls get rewarded, the bears don't. The bears get rewarded if they don't get cleaned out when the market crashes, but you know, market crashes are usually somewhat foreseeable. It's rare that people get surprised by a market crash. The tariffs, we knew about that a long time in advance. 2022, when they started raising rates, we knew about that like a year in advance. The tech bubble burst, I don't know who was surprised, but it wasn't me. You know, the housing crash, we knew it peaked in 2005. So rarely do you see a crash. Now there's the flash crash, but we're already in a downward period anyway. So yeah, it was a surprise, but the market at the end of the day wasn't down that much comparatively. So, you know, COVID, I wouldn't call that that was a quick decline, but quick meaning weeks. You know, you've got plenty of time to make adjustments. When they told me they were locking me in my house, I was out of the market before that. You know, that's kind of a bad sign when they see you can't leave your house. Anyway, so point being is there are people worried about losing their jobs. If you're one of them, I'm sorry. But we're talking about the stock market. The stock market, this doesn't matter, but it's an interesting indicator you should keep an eye on, okay? Because it's at a high that's only been seen since 2008, 2000, early 90s, in the early 80s. So, you know, there are times where it's happened. I can't even read this thing. Anyway, point being is it's rarely been this high. So that's interesting, right? And these things you should also look at and say, huh, isn't that interesting? Not, oh my God, the stock market's going to crash because of this. Huh, isn't that interesting? Let me see if I can find more data. All right, let me see if I can find more data. Let me bring up some other data points. All right, here we go. So here's some more. Okay, here's actions firms are taking in response to higher tariffs. And this is percentage. So percentage, the dark green is manufacturing, the light green is services. So manufacturing, 76% are passing the costs through consumers. 47% of service is passing on. I don't know why services are getting tariffed, just out of curiosity, they don't have goods.
How many? I mean, it must be like when you're using like foreign like call centers and things like
No,
that. I mean, I don't know
it's
whatever service.
probably non-manufacturing would be my guess. I
Yeah,
don't know, but that's my
yeah.
guess. Um, Absorbing the costs and increases internally. 50% of manufacturers are absorbing the costs internally. Um, by the way, these numbers don't add up to 100. So if you're already wondering, um, 37% of manufacturers are finding new domestic suppliers. Okay, that's a third. That's interesting. Moving up purchases ahead of the tariff implementation, only 30%. Really? Only 30% got ahead of it? That's kind of weak. Um,
There's a lot of wait and see going on from the ones I've talked to.
I know, but before the tariffs, we knew like we had 6 months to worry about that, and people didn't find other suppliers. It's kind of weird. Anyway, finding new foreign suppliers, only 17%. I thought a lot of them were not reshoring, diversifying their outsource. Like Vietnam, I think was a big target. India, scaling down operations or closing the business, 13%. Relocating production or service to the U.S., only 11%. So only 11% of the people are following Trump's dictate. It's just, I'm not saying that's practical. A lot of people can't. Like you can't reshore manufacturing if people want to get paid like triple or quadruple what they're getting paid in Vietnam. So that's not reasonable. Ultimately, we're trying to move away from China. That's the whole point of this. Not that we should not outsource, but we shouldn't use China. I think is the real big rub. So those are the actions that firms are taking. So 76% are passing along to consumers, 47% for services, 50% are absorbing costs. I wonder how much of the costs, because the question is, what's your margin to begin with? I have to say, since 2008, I think it was, I feel like a lot of corporations have built in huge margins for themselves because they fire employees and then they just don't rehire them. And they find other better systems or whatever they're doing. But I feel like corporations have a pretty big profit margin, and they haven't given it back to consumers. It hasn't been as competitive, which is typically what happens when you're in a monopoly or an oligopoly. I'm going to share two more or share a few more here, and then here we go. So this is the impact of tariffs sectors. This is really good for investors, so pay attention. Those of you audio viewers, I'll just read it. So the industries that have less impact from tariffs are cable, telecom, healthcare, utilities, technology. Things that are impacted the most by tariffs: consumer retail, energy, industrials, media, and the business services kind of neutral. So if you're thinking about investing and you're worried about tariffs, because we do have some tariff deadlines coming up, and I wonder how much Trump is going to push the envelope with that. He says the conversations with China are going well, so the likelihood is most other countries are probably going well in air quotes as well. And then let's see, two more. One of them, okay, so two more. I'm going to talk about the dollar, and then I'm going to talk about the macro view, and then we'll get back to Doug. So, all right, here we go. So this is a chart that is showing inflation compared to GDP. Now, what this shows, there's four quadrants. There's the upper left is stagflation, and each one of these quadrants has rates and S&P. Stagflation is when the S&P goes down and rates go up, interest rates go up. The recession is below that, which is the S&P and rates both go down. We've seen that 2020, 2008. When you go into a quote unquote recession, they drop their rates and the S&P drops. The upper right is where inflation, GDP are both rising. That's what they call the overheating. This is where the S&P goes up and rates go up. So it's kind of similar to what we've been seeing, where rates were higher up until the election, or right before the election, the S&P was going up. And then you've got the lower right, which is the Goldilocks. And the Goldilocks is rates are neutral, and the S&P is going higher. So right now, I would say we're kind of in the Goldilocks period, where maybe even rates are declining. And it seems as though the people in charge, the Fed or otherwise, seem to be managing the stock market rather well, where we're trying to I get the impression that rates actually are not really impacting the stock market all that much, just based on a few years ago. People just don't seem to care anymore. It used to have an impact. It's like when rates went up, you'd think real estate would crash. It didn't. So rates went up in the stock market. It initially crashed, but then it came back, and it's like nothing ever happened. And we've had high rates for a while. It hasn't impacted the stock market. So the question is, and this is an open question, and I'd love to get feedback from the audio viewers here. Do rates even matter anymore? And I ask that honestly because I have not seen in the last, whatever it is, 15 years where rates really mattered. We were worried about them since 2008. We dropped rates and everything's fine and printing money and blah, blah, blah. But have they really mattered? I don't know. I honestly don't think they do, which is a weird world because that doesn't make any sense. In a world where real estate doesn't drop when rates go up, how does that make any sense? It doesn't, but yet it's happened. So the question is, do rates matter anymore? And I challenge everyone to give me their opinions because the more I think about it, the less I realize that they probably don't. Now, if they went up to 12%, yeah, they probably matter. But you know, where we are now is kind of a historical norm range, and markets are still going higher. And yeah, they're talking about loan rates, but they said maybe once by the end of the year. They don't really even need to. I don't think they should have before the election. So anyway, point being is it's an important thing to keep in mind because those of you who are watching interest rates saying, oh my God, rates are going up, this is going to happen. The data recently is showing that rates don't matter. You should probably half ignore them. Here's a chart about the dollar. This is a change in the dollar index for the first half of every year since 1986. The dollar is, I wouldn't call it a crash, but the dollar has declined severely in the last 6 months. And people are talking about it a lot. I can tell you, in general, the dollar has more to do with macro opinions than day-to-day volatility, even though people attribute it. They're like, oh, the dollar's going down, it means gold must go up. Well, what happened the other day when the dollar went down and gold went down? What happened then? You know, you got to keep in context a larger picture. So the fact that the dollar's declining, it probably has further to go, but there's going to be a point, I don't know how soon, where I'd probably be a buyer because the dollar doesn't go to zero, just like it doesn't go to the moon. None of the countries' currencies do, because when they get too far out of whack, the politicians say, hold on a second, it's getting too cheap. Now we got to rebalance, and then you let another country get theirs cheap. So it seems like they have this game behind the scenes where like, all right, the dollar's getting too strong, we need to weaken it. And then they do something, and then it starts to drop, and then another country gets stronger. And so they basically take turns. It's just taking turns. Like, all right, it's weak, now it's strong, now it's weak, now it's strong. And, you know, the currencies are all relative to each other as they are relative to goods and services. So if you look at the dollar index is priced in relation to other currencies. It's not a static number. It's a basket of other currencies. That's why they call it the dollar index. So the index is comprised of the euro, the yen, the Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, all these other currencies. It's a basket of those as a percentage allocated, decided by a bunch of people. Now, if you compare it to gold, you just look at the price of gold, and that's the comparison. So the point is in comparison to all these other countries, we're devaluing our dollar. Why? Don't know. It's a good question. You know, but usually you hear people complain like, oh, the Chinese yuan is getting too cheap. You know, they're devaluing. Okay, well, what are we doing? Like, ours is pretty cheap right now. So they're doing it for a reason. We don't know the reason. Could be many reasons. There's a lot of negotiations going on. But just keep in mind that we're, compared to since 1986, we are one of the biggest declines in the dollar index in the first 6 months of the year. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying it means anything. I'm just saying that's something to keep in mind because of the fact that things don't decline that sharply forever. At some point, it'll probably bounce, and then you want to look at that as an opportunity. So I know. Thoughts, Doug?
Well, I mean, here's the thing that, you know, when we take a look at the weaker dollar, and again, what impact does Trump actually have? on it as president. Again, the levers are limited, but some of the things that he and his administration try to impact can certainly have some influence on it. But he's right where he wants to be. He's wanted to be. Like, he came out in part of his campaign and said that he had, and he said this for a long time, he's had a preference for a weaker U.S. dollar, especially in context of his bill, education provisions, all of these things. If, when he looks for a weaker U.S. dollar, the idea that he and his administration sees from it is the opportunity to boost exports, manufacturing, job creation. If they want to move this manufacturing back to the United States, and we have, and all of the reason for the tariffs is to create this, illusion of having a more competitive space for U.S. goods and on, internationally, to get manufacturing to come back here, to make it more expensive, because we have been in a trade deficit for decades. Now, there are many economists who would argue that's a positive, that it is, that a trade deficit is a sign of a growing and expanding economy. If you take a look at where economies start, it is basically, agriculture, and then it moves into the, manufacturing, the industrial age, and then it moves to technology, pharmaceuticals, etc. And so technology, manufacturing moves away, and of course those developed economies are now in a position to buy those goods developed cheaper. So there's obviously pros and con arguments about whether or not manufacturing in the United States is better from an economic standpoint, or whether or not or a trade deficit is worse. But that's very, very clear that in this administration's belief, that it is better for us to not have a trade deficit, for us to, again, ideally help jobs here in the United States by recreating a manufacturing, agricultural, and energy base, that a cheaper or a weakened U.S. dollar will now make it easier and for other individuals in other countries and other currencies with stronger dollars to buy our products. So they believe a weaker dollar could increase U.S. exports by 10 to 15% annually, helping steel, automotive, even helping farmers. I mean, we have been we've actually been an exporter of agriculture for a long time. So the belief being that, hey, if we can produce, these goods, but this agriculture now, allowing, the foreign entities to purchase more soybeans, wheat, etc. That is, again, it's in line with what they want to do. Obviously, whether or not that economically works out to be effective, time will remain, because there's different economists that look at these things differently and will tell you pros and cons of each. So one thing is for certainly true. We have been a net deficit trade for decades. There's a lot of problems with our economy that are there. Now, is it tied directly to that? Who knows? But in their opinion, they want to change it, and they see that that's going to fix a lot of the problems that people have felt, especially in the middle and a lower class. Counter to other opinions around that. So it is in line with what they want, and of course now they want to have, of course, lower interest rates to create greater quantitative easing, which in theory again ties to weakening of the dollar. So we'll see where that goes. Kirk, anything more you want to add on that?
No, I think we're close to wrapping it up here. We're at time. I'm still trying to. I just got back last night after a delayed flight, so it's kind of a S show today. So yeah, we can wrap it up here, and we'll circle back next week with some new updates.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and wrap up from my end. Just as I said earlier, there's the big beautiful bill. Whether or not it ends up being positive economically or negative economically, time will obviously tell. But currently, what is a fact is the only thing. I think the old saying, Kirk, is the only thing that's constant is change, and this is change. And there's going to be a lot of changes coming. And as people know, my company, Mergent College Advisors, MERGENT, College Advisors, Not only have we helped families figure out how to pay for college, how to use the resources more effectively, how to be able to tie and make an expensive education into something that is actually not going to be a disruption of your wealth, a disruption of your retirement, how to tie these two things together. But also part of my team is groups of individuals, independent education counselors who work with families to help pick the right schools, to make sure that it's going to be affordable. And now with the new changes coming through, because accessibility to external liquidity just got that much harder. Their goal is to drive down the cost of tuition to make these schools come back to earth. They believe that these schools were just escalating their tuition because there was an endless supply of funding to do so. Again, that may be true, but what is not true is that pushing one domino is going to have an immediate effect on the other. It's not like tuition's going to come back down tomorrow, even if they're right. That means even more than ever, having a plan to pick the right college that's going to have the right return on that investment, that's going to have the right cost, that's affordable to your family, that's not going to fleece your wealth, and be more creative about how you're going to be able to come up with the resources to pay for it so that you can protect your wealth and your legacy means more now than it has before. Changes are going to occur again, but again, if you smart money never guesses, it plans. So reach out to us, Mergent College Advisors, MERGENT, Mergent College Advisors, and mergentadvisors.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Doug.
That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, Wealth Manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.